Recently, I had to step in to stop some friends making big mistakes while planning their Alaska cruise. It reminded me of all the pitfalls there are when cruising Alaska, and because of that, why I meet too many cruisers saying their trip of a lifetime to the stunning region fell short. So welcome aboard, I'm Gary Bembridge, and I'm going to tell you how I help my friends have a great Alaska cruise and also help you get your Alaskan cruise right. The key reason things don't go to plan is I see cruisers, including my friends, choosing the wrong itinerary. When my friends decided to cruise Alaska, they did not appreciate that not all Alaska cruises are the same. I know it's easy to fall into the trap of missing out and visiting the right ports and seeing the best sites. It's really easy to do. So let me talk about the itineraries to choose from. There are 3 key itineraries. I told them they had to consider all of them to see which was best for them. The most common and popular is the Inside Passage. These are usually 7-day round trips, mostly sailing to and from Vancouver, Canada, or Seattle in the USA. The best Inside Passage cruises call on 3 key ports. First, Juneau, the capital, which has the Mendenhall Glacier and other glaciers, Mount Roberts, and some of the very best whale watching tours. Next, Skagway, which is best known for the White Pass and Yukon Railway, and is also a quaint historic town. And thirdly, Ketchikan, affectionately known as the salmon capital of the world. This is best known for attractions like the Great Alaskan Lumberjack Show, the historic Creek Street, totem parks, and access to the Misty Fjords region. Inside Passage cruises are ideal first-time cruises to get a feel for Alaska, and being round trips, it makes it quite easy for booking flights as well. The downside is they tend to have at least 2 sea days, one at each end getting to and from Alaska. So you have limited time exploring Alaska than the other itineraries offer. Also, if you do the sailing out of Seattle under US law, it must call into a foreign port, usually Victoria, Canada, so you can have even less time in Alaska. The second itinerary, and my favorite, are those sailing north to south. They sail between the ports closest to Anchorage, Seward and Whittier, and Vancouver. While usually also including those iconic ports of Juneau, Skagway and Ketchikan, because they go further north, they include the stunning Hubbard Glacier, Valdez and Sitka. They are usually 10 days long, and with usually just 1 sea day, you get to spend more time and see much more of Alaska. The downside is having to get a one-way flight to or from Anchorage, which can be really expensive. The hotels in Anchorage are outrageously overpriced, and it's actually quite fiddly getting down to Seward, 120 miles away, or Whittier, 60 miles away. Although there are some stunning, scenic train options, as well as cruise line bus transfers on offer. The third itinerary, which many people, including my friends, had no idea about, as they're not spoken about much, are the expedition cruise options. Now, these are not on classic cruise lines or ships and include small cruise lines like Uncruise or the Norwegian-based line Hurtigruten. They don't call on those main ports that I mentioned earlier, and they cruise in more out-of-the-way places. They're much more wildlife and scenery focused. With limited vacation time and mostly wanting to see those iconic Alaska highlights, my friends had chosen the Inside Passage option, but I could see their chosen cruise fell way short in a major way. They had planned to book a Norwegian Bliss 7-night Inside Passage cruise out of Seattle, but as I said, it fell short on many areas. First of all, it didn't call on all 3 iconic ports. Instead of Skagway, it went to Icy Strait. Secondly, they didn't look carefully at how long the ship spent in each of the ports and places. The cruise was only calling in Juneau, for example, in the morning from 6:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., which is too early for many of the excursion options, and it really limited time to explore. They would have been in Icy Strait Point from 6 a.m. to 3 a.m., so the same problem, and in Ketchikan also in the morning from 6 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. There was simply not enough time to spend exploring these ports and getting the most out of them, because the sites, the stores, and many of the excursions wouldn't be available for a big chunk of the early morning when they arrived. It also, by the way, called in Victoria, Canada on the way back, but it was there from 8 p.m. until midnight, making sightseeing near impossible in that very pretty city. Looking at the trip, there was going to be a lot of time at sea, not on land, exploring and sightseeing Alaska. So make sure that you look at the detail of any Alaska cruise to ensure that you're getting to spend all or much of the day in all of the critical ports and places as you possibly can. So we did that and actually suggest my friends switch to a Cunard Queen Elizabeth cruise, also out of Seattle, which had more time in port, but offered something in addition that every ideal Alaska cruise should have. Let me explain. The second critical area where I see people get things wrong is they don't go on the right cruise line. And I felt my friends were doing that, not just because of the ports, but by not thinking through what they really wanted from the cruise line. I feel there are three critical considerations when looking at what cruise line to choose for any Alaska cruise. And choosing is a challenge because there is a lot of choice. According to CLEAR, the Cruise Line Association, 50 ships sail Alaska every season, with over 700 individual sailings to choose from. Almost every single major cruise line sails in Alaska, with more going every year. So these are the three critical things that you need to think about when choosing the right cruise line. First, choose a cruise line that can take you into Glacier Bay. Of those 700 cruises a year, just over a third are allowed to go into Glacier Bay. So 70% of people cruising to Alaska will miss out seeing one of the most impressive places in Alaska. The National Park Service, which controls Glacier Bay, only allows 2 large cruise ships in per day. They also further limit that through a licensing system to only 6 cruise lines, which currently are Princess Cruises, Holland America Line, Norwegian Cruise Line, Seabourn, Cunard, and Viking. I strongly recommend you look at those lines that take you to Glacier Bay, as it is one of the most magnificent parts of Alaska to cruise to. By the way, if you are looking at those 6, Holland America have been cruising Alaska the longest, way over 70 years, and Princess for over 50 years. So as well as getting into Glacier Bay, they generally have very strong links within Alaska. They usually get the best docking spots and times in every port as well. So the second mistake is cruisers do not spend time thinking about what onboard experience is best going to match their needs. Because as you've heard, you will have a fair bit of time at sea. So you want to make sure that you're on a cruise line that's going to really match you, your family, or whoever you're traveling with needs. Now, whether you focus on the Glacier Bay lines or not, you have many options. If you're traveling with families or want lots of entertainment, you've got Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian Cruise Line. If you want to go adult only, you've got Viking or Virgin Voyages. You want a small ship luxury or ultra luxury experience, there's Oceania, Crystal, Regent, Silversea, and Seabourn. But if you want a more enrichment-based trip, there's Viking or Cunard. Now, my friends love enrichment talks. They love dressing up on cruises. So by getting them to go on Cunard made much more sense than their original Norwegian choice, which is very relaxed and doesn't have enrichment. Now, my third watch out may sound slightly contradictory to those I've given you so far, but when choosing the right cruise line for Alaska, consider that the cruise lines may not have the usual onboard passenger mix, nor the full experience you're going to find when you're sailing with them in the rest of the world. Alaska is such a bucket list cruise for people, and with such a short season running from May only through to September, many travelers are constrained about when they can go, because many travel as multi-generational groups or with their family, and so many people just literally look for a cruising line that's going when they want at a price that's within their budget. So even on lines like Cunard, Holland America, and Princess, which traditionally are sailing with older couples and few to no kids, in Alaska, they're usually full of families on most sailings. On both my Holland America and Princess cruises to Alaska, they were both jam-packed with kids who would take over the indoor pool, overrun events, so it's not a traditional experience I usually have on those lines. So bear that in mind. That's actually why on my last Alaska cruise, I actually booked on Viking, because it's an adult-only line, and on the next one I've booked on a more luxury line, Silversea, after the school vacation period, so I can have more of a classic Silversea experience. But talking of timing, there's an even more important timing issue I see causing many Alaska cruises to not go to plan. My friends wanted to maximize their chance of seeing wildlife, especially bears and whales, but their initial cruise was going actually too early in the season to ensure that. As I mentioned, the season is short, running from May through to September, though some do push it into October. Now, if cost is a factor, look at going at the start and the end of the season. So May and September, it will be cheaper, tend to have fewer families, and ports will be less packed. May is also the month with the lowest rainfall. It rains almost all through the season in Alaska, so you need to expect that. But if, like my friends, you really want to be sure to see more wildlife, the prime bear season kicks off mostly in July and into August when the salmon run starts. It's also a really good time for whale watching and birds. Although I must say, in my May and early June cruises, I did get to see a couple of bears, I did see some whales, sea otters and birds, but nothing like later in the season. Of course, July and August are peak time, they're busy, they're the costliest time, but that still made more sense for my friends who wanted to ensure they saw wildlife. Now, talking of costs, this is another thing I see causing many Alaska cruises to not go to plan. My friends also had failed to appreciate the severity of this. Alaska cruise fares can be much higher than many are used to paying for Caribbean or Mediterranean cruises, but it doesn't end there, as most of the other associated costs are much higher than many expect or unfortunately plan for. There are two critical costs that many, including my friends, underestimated and under budgeted for. First, getting to and from the cruise. Flights to and from the ports, be it Seattle, Vancouver, or Anchorage, tend to be really costly because demand is really high in those few short months. It's best to book flights as far ahead as you possibly can because airfares will get increasingly expensive the closer to the cruise you book. Also book any pre or post-stay hotels really early too. Hotels in all those ports, Vancouver, Seattle, and certainly Anchorage, can get crazy expensive. Anchorage, for example, has really limited hotel options and rooms. For example, I have an Alaska cruise out of Seward coming up and staying at the Hilton in Anchorage, which is pretty shabby and run down and poor. It's showing rates of from $500 to $600 for one night. Some hotels are already totally sold out for the dates too. I looked at hotel availability and pricing in Seattle, where my friends will be sailing from, and as they'd left it late, prices are almost double what they had expected and budgeted it to be. Now, the second thing that people don't factor in is excursion costs. Unlike the Caribbean, excursions are way more expensive in Alaska. There's high demand and limitations on availability for some of the iconic tours, including whale watching in Juneau or Sitka, going on wildlife watching boat tours followed by salmon bake lunch, flying up onto glaciers to walk on them or go dog sledding on glaciers, seaplane flights over glaciers and landscapes, or even going on the historic White Pass and Yukon Railway in Skagway. To do many of these exotic tours can add hundreds to the trip, with some excursions costing up to $600 per person for each of the tours. Many cruises have not budgeted or simply can't afford to experience any of those kind of magical tours. Now, because my friends found they couldn't afford many of the cruise line excursions, having not budgeted enough for the flights and hotels, that wiped out a slug of their budget, and to help you as well, I have done two things to help if you're struggling with this issue. First of all, I made a video and created a PDF download to take on your trip of things to do in every port for free or very minimal cost. Details on how to watch that video and download the PDF booklet at the end of this. Secondly, I negotiated with the independent tour company Shore Excursions Group to get my friends and also you 5% of any of their Alaska tours. Now, I like booking their tours because they're already cheaper than cruise line ones and they have smaller groups. Now, to get 5% off their tours, use the link tipsfortravelers.com/Shore Excursions and use the code TFT5 at checkout. Now, I've also put those details in the notes of this, but it's tipsfortravelers.com/Shore Excursions and the code TFT5 at checkout. I also like, by the way, on their site that you simply put in the line, the ship, departure date, and it will bring up all of those available tours by port. I already mentioned the importance of booking flights and hotel as far in advance as you can to keep costs down, but everything should be booked as far ahead as possible to ensure your trip goes to plan. I cannot stress this enough. My friends only planned their Alaska trip 6 months before they wanted to go, and they found their cruise fare was much higher than people who'd booked a year or more out. Also, they had limited choice of cabins by booking late. They didn't get the location they wanted because early bookers had snapped them up. But as well as excursions being costly, they can be in short supply, and the best will often sell out well before the trip. I'll give you an example where early booking made a huge success. for me personally, because I experienced an incredible adventure as a result of moving early. On my Majestic Princess cruise 2 years ago, we had morning scenic cruising to the gorgeous Hubbard Glacier. Now, I booked my cruise 18 months before. I checked the excursions as soon as they opened, and I saw there was an excursion listed on a small 120 passenger boat that would meet the ship near Hubbard Glacier and sail as close to the glacier itself as was allowed. It wasn't expensive, and on the day I got really close to the glacier to see it calving while there was over 2,000 guests some distance way back sitting on the ship fuming away because, of course, they hadn't gone in and locked it in early. With all of this in mind, why don't you join me over in this video that I mentioned earlier that I've made on how to get the most from Alaska ports for free or minimal cost, and links there to download the PDF to take on your trip. See you over there.